Hi, I'm Brett from Brooklyn Craft Company, and in this video I'm going to show you how to machine bind a quilt with mitered corners. So we're going to be binding our quilt with double fold bias tape quilt binding. This is a product you can buy in a Sewing Notion store. We sell it on our website, brooklyncraftcompany.com, and it also comes with our black and white super easy quilt kit. This is a great product because it's ready to go and you can just start your quilt binding. It comes in lots of different colors. So the reason it's called double fold is because it's actually folded a bunch of times. You might think this is like quadruple fold, but the reason it's called double fold is because it's folded in half and then each end is folded in half again. And if you look closely at it, you'll see that one side is a little bit longer than the other, and that's going to go in the back of your quilt. So this is a very simple style of quilt binding. It's a little bit down and dirty. I like it because it's fast and easy and it doesn't make me procrastinate it, because I've had quilts that sit unbound for years because I can't get around to doing it the hard way. So this is the easy way. There's lots of other ways, but I like this because it's fast and easy. So we're going to start on one side and we're going to leave about 6 inches of a tail of our binding before we actually start attaching it. And again, I've got that long part on the underside. I'm going to open this up and just put my quilt right inside of it. This is just a little small sample quilt that I'm using so that you can see everything on a small scale. And I'm going to scooch it so that the edge of the quilt is butting up into the edge of the quilt binding. And now I'm going to sew it right along the edge. I'm not going to sew on the very, very edge. I'm going to go in about 1/8 of an inch from the edge on the top. And the reason for that is we want to make sure we're also catching the back in that seam. And the back was a little bit longer, so that's a little bit of a safety, but we're going to scooch in a little bit more just to make sure we definitely catch that back. I'm using a walking foot, which is just really easy for sewing through lots of thick layers of fabric. And again, I'm going to start sewing about 6 inches back from the start of my binding. I'm going to show you how to attach this all the way around in one go, corners and all. All right, so here we go. Just a regular stitch with my walking foot. I'm going to sew all the way down to the first corner. And I'm actually going to sew right off the edge and stop. And now here is a really easy way to make mitered corners all in one go. Again, this isn't the only way, it's just the fast way, which is why I like it. So we're going to fold the binding so that we continue to wrap it around the sides, and the 2 corners are just going to make like a little package thing like that. And that's all there is to it. You can kind of scoot it a little bit if you need to so that it meets up nicely in this corner. Check the back and make sure the fold's looking good on the back. Looking good. And now I'm going to start sewing again right here. I'll do a little back stitch just to make sure that it's nice and secure in that spot. Okay, so let's look at how to make that corner one more time. Coming up on another corner, I'm going to sew just to the edge of the quilt and then stop. And now to fold that mitered corner, I'm just going to simply fold my binding so that that center fold is still aligned with the next side, and kind of make sure everyone is all tucked in nicely at the corner, but it tends to just sort of nicely fall into place to make that little mitered line. And then I'll start sewing right here and continue on. couple back stitches for this new seam. And here I am back to where I started. So I'm going to, again, my goal is just to sew to right about here from where I began the binding, but again, I'm gonna leave a long tail. And I wanna stop with about at least 6 inches space in between where I started sewing at the very beginning of the quilt. So I'm gonna stop sewing right about here. I want both the beginning and end tails of the quilt binding to have lots of extra room in between them. Take a little back stitch here just so it doesn't get away from me. And now I will talk about how to join these two ends and finish the binding. So here's our quilt. Our binding has gone all the way around and these are our two tails. And I've left about this much space in between them because you really want to make sure you have plenty of room to maneuver and work in here. And now we're just going to mark a point that's just about the center in between. Actually, I'm just going to use this quilting line as my center point, but if I didn't have that quilting line there, I could insert a straight pin just as a marker. And then I'm going to close one side of the quilt binding. I'm going to use a quilting ruler and a disappearing ink pen, and I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch from my center line. And the 1/2 inch will be my seam allowance. Now I'm going to take that one away. I'm going to close this one and I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch on the other side of the center line. So now I've got one that's marked on the one side of the center line and one that's marked on the other side of the center line. I will cut at both of those marked points. And now what I've got are two pieces that overlap by exactly a 1/2 inch each. Now I'll open them up. This is where it gets a little awkward and it's good to leave yourself plenty of room to work. I'm going to bring them together so they meet with right sides together. And I'll sew them together along this line with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. So let's go to the machine and do that. Okay, so here's my two pieces. I've got them aligned right sides together. I'm going to sew them with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I could pin these here, but I think I'm going to be okay without pinning. But if you would like to pin for some extra comfort, by all means, go for it. Here's my 1/2 inch seam allowance. And now, for the moment of truth, when I open this back up and fold everything back together, ta-da! It all meets up nicely. And so all I have to do is just continue sewing this one little bit of my binding seam, and then I'm done. So there it is. I just have to trim my threads and I'm totally done. So you see you can quilt an entire quilt like this and finish your binding in very little time. It's wonderful because it's so quick and easy. It's all done by machine. There's nothing to procrastinate. I really like this method. It works great. It looks good on the front and the back. And best of all, it's done. And now I can just enjoy my quilt.